Hi all. It's a bit of a windy day today, but it's beautiful and sunny, and I wanted to take a walk and invite you into a conversation that I had with God the other day, which happened on a walk. So here we are. I had been hurt by a brother, somebody within the church, somebody who God dearly loves, and I was having just a real hard time forgiving him that day. It was stuck in my heart like a little kid. You know when you're a kid and somebody does wrong and you tell your parents or somebody in authority, and what you really just want is you want that person to suffer for what they've done to you. You know, you're like, oh, what they did to me, that was just so wrong, and they don't deserve to get away scot-free. They really need to suffer. Well, that was in my heart, and part of me was like, I shouldn't feel that way. You know, I should forgive him. I just need to get over this and forgive him. That's what God would want me to do. But I just couldn't bring that feeling up in my heart. And so I was mad. I was just mad. And I was talking to God and I was saying, God, you know, the way he treated me was just so wrong. Like what he did, I just hate it. I was like, don't you hate it, God? And God said to me, yeah, I hate it. And I was like, wait, what? He says, I really hate it. I hate it more than you. He says, in fact, don't you think somebody ought to suffer for that? And I was like, okay, yeah, actually, I do think that somebody should suffer for that. And then he brought to my mind Isaiah 53, I believe it's verse 10, where it says, but it was Yehovah's will to crush him and to cause him to suffer. And it hit me that God hates our sin. He hates what we do to each other. He hates the way that we treat each other, and he agrees with us. That we don't just get over the wrongdoing, that it's not right just to pretend like it's no big deal, because it is a big deal. And it's a big deal to us, and it's a big deal to him. And he agrees with that impulse that we have in us that says somebody really ought to suffer for this. You know, but that day, God told me that although he agreed that somebody had to suffer, he had already done that. He had wanted to crush Jesus for our sins. He had wanted somebody to suffer, and I think even he saw that sin as bigger than I did. He said, in fact, somebody shouldn't just suffer for this, somebody should die for this. And so he crushed Jesus, and he caused him to suffer, and he caused him to die, because sin is wrong, and it's unconscionable, and you don't just get over it. And in that moment, it was like, I've never experienced anything like this before in my life. It was like all my anger just evaporated in an instant like that, and it was replaced by this really inexpressible joy and freedom, as if God had said he'd completely validated my pain. He'd completely agreed with me on just the wrongness of sin, and he had gone beyond that. He said, you're not wrong, but he said his love was greater even, and that he had punished that sin. And because I was looking at it and I realized that the wrongdoing had been recognized and had been acknowledged and had been punished, and because of his love for us had been punished in his son's death on the cross, that it was taken care of, that it was paid, that it was resolved. And then in my heart, forgiveness for that brother became easy. It became natural. It became simple. Because I realized that God hadn't told me just to pretend like the hurt didn't matter and get over it. He said it did matter. It was terrible. And it was worth somebody dying for. And in his great love for us, Jesus Christ took that punishment and died for us. And I just thought, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person who's ever been mistreated, by others. And I'm certainly not the only person who's ever been mistreated by a child of God, by a brother or a sister, by someone who he loves. And in our head, if we get this idea that when God asks us to forgive us, he's just saying like, well, just pretend like it's no big deal and get over it. We find it impossible to forgive or nigh on impossible, or we try our hardest, but we don't really pull it off. It doesn't make its way all the way down into our emotions. But when we recognize that God hates that sin and that wrongdoing, that hurting of one to another, just as much as us, in fact, even more, and that it was his will to cause someone to suffer for that wrongdoing, and that he poured that out, and that he poured that out on a willing sacrificial victim, upon his only begotten Son, upon Jesus, who took that punishment upon himself. Now then we find that if the penalty's been paid, and if the justice has been meted out, then we can forgive. We can let it go. We can say to this person in our heart, with our lips, with our voices, and in our prayers, we can say, I forgive you. You owe me nothing. And we can release that. And in that we find freedom. So I don't know what you're having a hard time forgiving today, but I hope that you'll look at Isaiah 53 this week, that you'll read it, and that you'll find in there reason to understand that God cares about your pain, and he cares about what was done to you. He cares about these unforgivable things, and he agrees with you that they need to be punished, that somebody needs to suffer, yea, even die for them. And he already accomplished that. It happened on the cross. And so you can be free. You don't need to hold on to that bitterness, that anger, that unforgiveness anymore. You can turn to Jesus Christ and find forgiveness in him, and forgiveness for others, and freedom. And that's my prayer for you today. God bless.